Jung believed that sex is the most dangerous thing a human can do, not because of morality, but because it is a literal psychological ritual. It is the only time we willingly hand the keys of our consciousness over to a demon. Today, we are peeling back the skin of modern dating to reveal the dirty secret of Jungian psychology. We're going to talk about why your lust isn't actually about pleasure. It's about power, the consumption of the soul, and a desperate low-budget search for God in the dirt. If you've ever felt poisoned by a person you once craved, this is why. Why him? Why her? Why that specific toxic person? Jung famously stated, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." But here is the truth the textbooks won't tell you. Most people use sex to outsource their darkness. In Jungian terms, you have a shadow, the basement of your soul where you've locked away everything you find vile or unacceptable. If you are a person who is hyper-controlled, polite, and good, your shadow is starving for chaos. When you feel intense chemistry, it's often just your shadow recognizing its missing half in someone else. You aren't falling for a person, you are falling for a mirror. You crave the bad boy or the unstable woman because they are acting out the sins you are too afraid to commit yourself. The sexual act isn't a union of two people. It's a psychic heist where you try to steal the energy of the darkness you've repressed. We live in a sterile world. Everything is tracked, measured, and sanitized. Because of this, Jung argued that modern humans are spiritually starving. He believed that sex has become the last remaining animalistic ritual where we can touch the numinous. The numinous is that feeling of being in the presence of something both divine and terrifying. Why do we crave extreme or shameful intimacy? Why do people seek out the transgressive? Because for 20 minutes, you get to stop being you. You enter a state of participation mystique, a primitive trance where the boundaries of the ego dissolve. Jung warned that many people don't actually want intimacy, they want obliteration. They use the heat of the encounter to burn away the boredom of their own existence. But there is a price. When you use sex as low-budget enlightenment, you aren't building a soul, you are burning it as fuel. Every time you leave a bed feeling empty or hollow, it's because you didn't connect. You just performed a ritual with a ghost. This hollowness isn't a lack of pleasure, it's a lack of presence. When you seek obliteration, you are essentially asking the other person to help you murder your own consciousness for an hour. You are running away from the static of your own mind, the parts of yourself you can't stand to be alone with. Jung called this the avoidance of the self. By turning the bedroom into an alchemical furnace, you might melt away your anxiety for a moment, but you are also melting away your substance. The ghost you are performing the ritual with isn't just the other person. It's the phantom of the person you could have been if you weren't so busy trying to escape yourself. You become a psychic amputee, leaving bits of your vital energy behind in exchange for a temporary trance. Over time, this internal theft leaves you spiritually bankrupt. You find that you can no longer feel real unless you are in the middle of an explosion. You aren't reaching for the divine anymore. You are just trying to feel anything at all in a soul that you've slowly turned to ash. Now we get to the dirtiest truth of all. Jung understood that beneath the veneer of love, there is a brutal battle for psychological dominance. Lust is rarely about desire, it is about possession. When we are attracted to someone, we are often trying to eat them. We want to consume their confidence, their beauty, or their power to fill the holes in our own psyche. Jung spoke of the anima and animus, the internal archetypes of the opposite sex. When you fall in love, you project this archetype onto a human being. You turn them into a god. but sex is the moment where the projection meets the reality. If the person cannot live up to the God you've imagined, the alchemy turns into poison. This is why the most intense passions turn into the most violent hatreds. You aren't angry at them. You're angry that they failed to be the deity your soul demanded. You feel killed because you gave them the power to define your existence, and they used it to confirm your worthlessness. This is the betrayal of the blueprint. You didn't fall in love with a human being. You fell in love with a psychic structure you built in the dark, and you forced them to wear it like a costume. When they inevitably stumble, when they show a trace of weakness or ordinary humanity, the costume rips. In that moment, the alchemy doesn't just fail, it backfires. The energy you used to worship them turns into a caustic acid that burns through your own ego. You realize you haven't been building a bridge to another person. You've been building a pedestal for a statue that just fell on top of you. The violence of this shift is proportional to your own internal void. Jung understood that the more hollow we are inside, the more weight we put on our partner to be our savior. We become psychological vampires trying to suck the numinous quality out of them to keep our own inner demons at bay. When the supply runs dry or when they refuse to play the role of the god anymore, your psyche goes into a state of withdrawal. The hatred you feel is actually a desperate, subconscious attempt to destroy the evidence of your own dependence. You want to erase them because they are a living reminder that you are still empty, and no amount of alchemical union can fix a soul that refuses to look at itself in the mirror. This is the shadow vomiting phase of a dying attraction. When you can no longer use the other person as a drug to numb your own inadequacy, you begin to project all of your own vile and unintegrated traits onto them. They aren't just a person who let you down anymore. They become the personification of your own failure. Every flaw they have is magnified until they look like a monster. But Jung's darker insight is that the monster you see in them is actually your own shadow that you've finally been forced to confront. You are screaming at them, but you are really screaming at the mirror. You hate them because they stopped being the anesthesia that kept you from feeling the rot in your own spirit. In this state, intimacy becomes a form of psychic cannibalism. You try to tear pieces out of their character, their joy, their social standing, their confidence, just to prove they were never the god you thought they were. You want to leave them as hollow as you feel, because the alchemist inside you has turned into a devourer. You realize that the intense passion you felt at the beginning was never about union. It was a search for a host. You didn't want to love them. You wanted to wear their soul as a second skin, so you wouldn't have to feel the coldness of your own. When the skin peels off, the exposure is so painful that you'd rather destroy both of you than admit you are still standing in the dark, alone. But what happens when the other person isn't a person at all? What happens when the object of your desire is a glowing rectangle? Jung warned that the mind cannot distinguish between a visceral reality and a powerful archetype. When you consume sexual media, you aren't just watching, you are performing a unilateral alchemical ritual. You are projecting your most sacred internal archetypes, your anima, your animus, your shadow, onto a digital ghost that can never return the energy. This is low-budget enlightenment at its most dangerous. You are pouring your life force, your libido in the Jungian sense, into a void. Because the screen cannot react to transform you, the chemical reaction happens entirely inside your own nervous system, burning out your receptors. You become addicted to the image of the god rather than the soul of the human. You are effectively eating yourself. You aren't seeking connection. You are seeking a high-speed bypass to the numinous that leaves your actual life feeling like a grey, sterile wasteland. You are trading your Stone that cannot be destroyed for a flickering pixel that leaves you spiritually bankrupt by morning. This is the ultimate internal cannibalism. When sexuality becomes about consumption rather than union, you are practicing what Jung might call the pornography of the soul. You are harvesting the energy of an archetype without the weight of a human. You want the fire of the shadow without the responsibility of the person. But the psyche has a built-in tax for this theft. Every time you use an image to obliterate your boredom, you are thinning the veil of your own ego. You are training your soul to be a voyeur of its own life. You begin to lose the ability to see beauty in the ordinary or the flawed, because you have become addicted to the hyper-real God images on the screen. The dirty secret here is that you aren't consuming media. The media is consuming your capacity to be whole. You end up in a state of psychic impotence, where the only thing that can make you feel alive is an increasingly violent, increasingly transgressive explosion of imagery. You have become a prisoner in your own laboratory, surrounded by gold that is actually lead. So, is sex killing your soul? If you use it to escape your shadow, yes. If you use it to borrow someone else's light because you're too afraid to find your own, yes. Carl Jung didn't want us to be celibate. He wanted us to be conscious. He wanted us to realize that every time we undress, we are stepping into an alchemical laboratory. The goal of alchemy wasn't just to make gold, it was to find the lapis, the stone that cannot be destroyed. True intimacy only happens when two whole people meet, not two half people trying to eat each other to feel full. Next time you feel that poisonous pull, stop. Ask yourself, what part of my own darkness am I trying to find in them? Because until you make the unconscious conscious, your lust will continue to direct your life, and you will call it fate. If this video hit a nerve, it's because your psyche is ready to stop running. To help you actually decode these patterns, I've put together a free guide. The Shadow Integration Blueprint. It's a simple, step-by-step PDF that shows you how to identify the gods and demons you're projecting onto others so you can reclaim that energy for yourself. You can download it for free at the link in the description below. If you use it to escape the static of your own mind, yes. If you use it to borrow a sense of life from an image or a person because you're too afraid to strike a match in your own darkness, yes. Carl Jung didn't want us to find a soulmate. He wanted us to find the soul. He wanted us to realize that every flash of desire is actually a message from the other living inside our own skin. It is the language your psyche uses to tell you what part of yourself has been buried, ignored, or starved. The goal of alchemy wasn't to find someone else, it was to find the lapis, the indestructible core of your own being. True liberation only happens when you stop trying to eat the world to feel full and start integrating the stranger within. Next time you feel that poisonous pull, stop. Ask yourself, what part of my own missing light am I trying to find in this? Because until you make the unconscious conscious, your desires will continue to direct your life, and you will call it fate. Creating content that explores these darker internal truths is a risk. It's a specialized kind of art that often gets buried by algorithms that prefer things to be safe, polite, and shallow. If you found value in this exploration, if you feel that this kind of creative work needs to exist in the world, please help me protect and grow this project by hitting the like button. Every like, comment, and share acts as a vote for more depth and more artistic honesty on this platform. When you subscribe, you aren't just following a channel, you are supporting a creative vision that refuses to look away from the complex reality of the human spirit. Your engagement is what allows me to keep producing this art and diving into these deeper waters. Thank you for being part of this journey.